Hello, Lynette here. Tucker Carlson had an interesting monologue last night that made me feel very validated. He was talking about the Elizabeth Warren book written in 2003 when she was still a Harvard professor. Now, considering what a far left liberal dumbazoid she is, it's really surprising in that recent of history that she wrote this book because it was called the two income, get this right, the two income trap. And what it was a book about how American families had fallen into this habit, this pattern, this socially acceptable ideology that it takes two incomes to have a family. And of course, in a lot of regards, that's true. All of our major things are more expensive in relation to our income than they were, say, 50 years ago. Our homes are more expensive. Our college educations, we have daycare to worry about. All of these our cars, all of these are more percentage-wise of our income than they were. When you think about the stories that our parents told of how they bought their first house with $500 down payment, and it's and the whole house cost about as much as somebody's monthly house payment, the whole payment now. It's really very sad. But putting those ideas aside, the fact of the matter is, we as a society here in America decided that it was okay for mothers to not stay at home and raise their children. And I saw this happen. This is something very much a part of my lifespan, because my daughter was born 81, so in 86, she goes into kindergarten, right? And that year I was pregnant with her brother. Okay, so that in 86, then people were completely just, oh, you stay at home and raise your daughter, how nice for you. And nobody thought too much about it. It was the beginning, though. There were lots of women that were out there working and leaving their kids in daycare. And I thought to myself, at the time, I was horrified. I couldn't imagine being away from my little girl. So then move ahead 6 years, my son's born, and now I'm taking him to school. And these other mothers, they're all working, every one of them. And they might be in really crappy jobs. They might be working at a McDonald's, or they might be housekeepers, or they clerks. Just really, we're not talking careers. We're talking jobs. And they couldn't understand why I wanted to stay home and raise my kids, because wasn't I bored? And this sort of mentality. And the problem is that America said, oh, that's fine. In fact, that's good, because American women should be working. This whole raising of their children thing, that's old-fashioned nonsense. And this book of Elizabeth Warren's in 2003, now we're going ahead years from what I'm talking about, and she's recognizing it as she calls it a trap in the title. And I think that's very true. It was a mindset. It was a sociological shift in our thinking that said, this is good and okay and acceptable. What would have happened if America had said, you know what, we're going to figure something out so that this doesn't happen? Now, what she also makes claim in the book for, which is interesting to me, is that by having these two incomes, that there became an environment for these for house prices to go up because there's more money out there. And I have never thought about that as far as connecting those two dots, but I suppose that could be true. I remember being horrified by the time my son was starting school, how easily people let other people raise their children. And if you're making a minimum wage and you have to pay just a few dollars less than that an hour to have your kid be watched, what benefit is there? I don't understand. And I think we made a terrible mistake. I think that we should have placed more value on the job of motherhood. And I believe that this was actually a project of the left, and it was a project of the women's movement, and they've kicked themselves in the ass at this point, because now we have a whole world full of these kids. They're grown-ups now. They're in their 30s, right? My son's 31 almost, and so he's absolutely part of that group. And these people are, I think they're fairly useless. They have no sense of self. These are the snowflakes out there. These are the social justice warriors. These are the kids that got awards for participating. This is what happened because they weren't in an environment of a mom and a dad working together cohesively to have a family, because a family is a unit. It is a thing. That's why there is one word for that. And America has forgotten what that means. We let all sorts of people raise our kids, be it a daycare or a nanny. My neighbor across the street got a nanny agency in New York, and to give her a Guatemalan young woman to raise her newborn child that hadn't even been born yet, and her 3-year-old son, because she's too hoity-toity to raise her own kids. So she imports some woman who just barely speaks English and appears to have the IQ of linoleum. Okay, that's who I'd want to raise my 2 little kids. I tell you what, it's, this is classic though. And it fits in with also what's happened to the respect and the veneration that we give to fathers and to the men in our lives, because they're the evildoers. They're the bad guys. They're responsible for the downfall of society, obviously. If you didn't know that, then you're not doing your research. So between those two, we've created this monster where everybody has to work. And it doesn't matter. Like I say, these aren't women that are out there working because they have always wanted to be a doctor. So they went through 90 billion years of school, college debt to be a doctor. That's great. These are women that are just working to make money to live on. Why isn't the job of being a mother as important? We're reaping what we've sown, is what I believe. And what I find fascinating in this book of Elizabeth Warren's, since she's such a lefty, is that, is somebody going to call her on this and go, gosh, Elizabeth, you had these super conservative ideas back in 2000. I'm like, we're talking recent history here. This isn't 1977 that we're talking about. 2003, okay? It's 15 years ago. And who's going to call her on this? She is so full of shit. This whole thing with her drinking her beer, and I'm going to get me a beer. I wouldn't let my daughter say that if she was in high school. I'd say speak properly and get me a beer. It was embarrassing. But that's not the point. The point is that we as a society have to recognize that we have made an error. And the left has done this, I believe, on purpose. I believe it has been part of a sociological experiment to see if they could take the family, because people are always going to have kids. They're always going to have babies. The problem is that they're not always going to just automatically fall into the thing of decades past where, yes, we're going to have babies, of course, but then I'm going to stay home and raise them, and my husband's going to bring home an income that will provide for us to the fashion that we need to have. And when our kids get grown up, then we're going to have a retirement together. This American dream thing, why is that such a bad thing to think that that's an American dream? And this is what Make America Great is about, I believe. It's about whatever it is for you. I believe, to me, it's just really important that we return to something closer to a society that values things that worked for millennia and doesn't say that, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Of course, women go out and have a career if they want to. Absolutely. I happen to have been born with a birth defect. I have absolutely zero ambition. It's something wrong up here. But I do get that people have ambition. My daughter, very ambitious, very smart, has risen up in her career. She's in tech, and she's completely self-taught. She's brilliant, marvelous. But she also hasn't stopped to have a family, because she doesn't want somebody else to raise her children. So until she can be at that position where a man is making enough money to be able to support the household so she can have a baby, she's not going to do it. I don't know. I view that as intelligent. So part and parcel with this is this denigration of the men as men as caregivers, men as head of households. I'm not talking about the old religious thing where he tells you what to do and all that malarkey. Of course not. But I'm talking about a structure that if we can go back to valuing that and not saying that that's awful and stupid and a waste of time and what's wrong with that woman, she should be working a minimum wage job because it would be better than staying at home. And what are you taking care of her husband. Well, that's a job. Taking care of a family is a job. There were many years, many hours where I felt I was working much harder than my husband. Okay? Because that's being a homemaker is a difficult job. So there's my conservative rant for you. Please remember that I used to be a liberal. When you think, she's just a crazy old white lady. No, I just an idea, and I think that this Elizabeth Warren book has kind of, we'll see if it gets any flutter from the left media. I don't think it will. I think they'll just quickly try to act like Tucker never brought it up. She's certainly not going to talk about it. He apparently invited her on his show, but he knows she'll never show up. She's too busy drinking beer in her kitchen, having her husband waft by, who apparently thought she was being a big fat retard. The whole thing was hilarious. In case you haven't seen it, search it out and look at it, because it's just a scream. But anyway, thanks for listening. See you later. Bye-bye.